Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I am not a fan of the beach. Some people enjoy the beach, finding rest and renewal there. Others find those same blessings in the mountains. Frankly, I don't care at all for the beach, and I love the mountains. Now, having said that, some of you know that I served a church at the beach and stayed there for 8 years. Let me be clear. I didn't like the beach before that, and being there didn't improve my opinion any. However, my mother jokingly told me and others that my serving that church was proof that it really was a call from God. Otherwise, I would never go there. This week we are looking at some strange happenings that can be found in chapters 15 through 18 in the New Testament book of Acts. We looked at the story of the Jerusalem Council and the profound insight that God's love is offered and given to all people. Yesterday we considered the role of unity and community in faith. Today, we want to look at another odd little story because it says something about the things God calls us to. Today, our story comes from some verses in Acts 16, and when we read it, it sounds a bit like a travelogue, as if someone is compiling a record of where they went and where they planned to go. One little side note. It must have been about this time that Luke joined in with Paul. You may know that Acts is part of a two-part work, the Gospel of Luke, and then the story continues in Acts, written by the same person who wrote the Gospel. Here, in verse 8, the text tells us that they went here and there. Then suddenly, in verse 11, it is, we went. Somewhere in there, Luke is now along for the journey. So let me just share these few verses with you. They went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. When they had come opposite Mysia, they attempted to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So, passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision. There stood a man of Macedonia pleading with him and saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, we immediately tried to cross over to Macedonia, being convinced that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Samothrace, the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira and a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. The strange happening that we need to notice here in all these travels is the part in verse 6 about having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit. Then in the next verse, they try to go to Bithynia, and the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. What's going on here? We commonly talk about being called by the Holy Spirit to do something, but here it seems that the Holy Spirit is actively preventing something. Professor of Old Testament Jack Levinson points out that sometimes the Holy Spirit holds us back. We may be all filled with mission and zeal and excitement to go where we think we are supposed to be headed. Where we think. That was certainly the case with Paul and his companions. They had their plan, but that had little to do with God's plan. The author of Acts clearly sees the obstacles put in their way as the work of the Holy Spirit to redirect them, not where they wanted to go, but where the Holy Spirit intended for them to go. The next thing that happens is that Paul gets a vision of a man from Macedonia beckoning him to come. So that's where they went. Everyone knew they had been prevented from going one way so that God could send them another. We are so full of our plans, aren't we? Maybe the message here is to be more open, more receptive to God's plan. Another beach story. I remember heading south on Highway 17 toward Pawleys Island. A bit down the road, Business 17 and Bypass 17 come together to form one road, and as I approached that point, I saw a person on the north side of the road off in the weeds, and he was on his knees and raising up with his hands in the air and then falling with his face toward the ground. I thought that maybe someone had had a wreck and this person was in physical or emotional anguish, and I slowed down to stop and help. By this time I had passed him, and some other cars were stopping, and I looked at the scene in my mirror and suddenly knew what was going on. In my mirror, I could see that this young man was riding a bicycle, and just ahead of him was the fork of Business and Bypass 17. He was kneeling in the grass in deep, fervent prayer about which way God wanted him to go. I marveled at his faith and also at his openness to God's will for him. I am reluctant to admit that I don't often seek God's will that earnestly. I am also reluctant to admit that I far too often focus on my plans and don't even consult with God about God's plans for me. I don't think I'm alone in that either. For most of the episodes this week, I'm using an article by Jack Levinson, and I want to end today quoting what he says about all this. He writes, "A man of Macedonia calls for Paul's help in the vision, but it is not a man whom Paul meets. Luke recalls that on the Sabbath day we went outside the gate by the river where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us. It may have been a man who called, but it was a woman among women who listened." Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.